You're watching Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, and this is Clinical Rounds, where we discuss topics of clinical relevance. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. John Umhau. John, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Glad to be here.
Well, we've known each other for a number of years, but could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been interested in a lot of things related to nutrition and helping people on the down and out. And started out working in homeless healthcare in DC, ended up at the NIH studying alcoholism. And I studied alcoholism for 20 years. Then went to the FDA, also worked for the Indian Health Service a little bit. And as I retired from the government, I wanted to do my own thing. So I started a private practice.
And you and I met at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center.
Right.
And you were at that point. I think you were working across the street at the National Institute of Health doing.
That's
your
right.
research.
I was in the U.S. Public Health Service. I was Commissioned Corps Officer for 27 years.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit today about nutrition. You did some unique studies on vitamin D and omega-3s over the course of many years, and I remember you talking about even general health, cancer rates, suicide rates, and I'd like to kind of explore the dietary treatment. I mean, basically using food for medicine, and what you've learned those many years doing the research.
Well, what I learned was that there's a lot of push to not do research on nutrition, but to develop medications, which is what we did at the NIAAA. We developed medication for alcohol, and that's what I find helps along with better eating. One of the things that's fascinating about alcoholism is that the brain is deteriorated. People have atrophy, smaller brains after they've been drinking for years. Well, what the fascinating thing is, once people stop drinking and they start eating in a recovery program, 6 weeks later, their brain has increased in volume by 2%. It's a huge growth in brain tissue.
Wow. So how much do they lose with chronic alcoholism?
Well, it's quite a remarkable amount of brain that they will lose. And I remember looking at people in my research there at NIH who were like in their 20s, and they lost considerable brain material based on heavy drinking. And we know that needs to be replaced. And to replace that, you need omega-3 fatty acids.
We're talking about cerebral atrophy more than gray matter atrophy.
We're looking at gray matter and white matter, but it's particularly the white matter that grows back quickest. So when you recover after 6 weeks of sobriety, it's the white matter that's growing back, and those are the connecting fibers, which sort of makes sense, right? Because the connections between your frontal executive parts of your brain need to get down to the lower parts of your brain that are more driven by craving and emotion and so forth. And if those connections are weak, you can't use your good intentions to block the emotional craving parts.
Wow. So you actually need the recovery of the brain helps reinforce your ability to not go back to drinking.
Exactly. And what we do in the kind of the state of the art has been, well, let's do talk therapy. Let's talk about or learn about treatment or do psychotherapy. When you look at the atrophied brains of these poor folks that are suffering from alcohol use disorder, and you see how shrunken they are, it's like, how on earth could these people take advantage of psychotherapy? They can't. They need to heal the brain first.
There's been studies about the prejudice of practitioners that think, well, just eat less. Don't drink as much. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Just get some discipline in your life. And there really is so much more than that. You just can't turn it off.
Alcoholism used to be thought of as a nutritional disease. That was the problem, because they knew that once you started adding nutrients, people would start recovering, and that's really only logical, but it really makes a big difference. You
got to expound on that. So alcoholism is a nutrient disease?
Back in the 1960s, state of the art was alcoholism was thought of as a nutritional disease.
Okay.
Certainly, a lot of the big experts in in the chemistry of vitamins, B vitamins, and so forth, thought that, this is really what the problem is. And that's what we find is people who eat better and recover, especially the omega-3s, and then they all of a sudden can think better, and they just say, I'll just quit drinking.
So you actually use in your practice omega-3s, pretty good dosage, and that actually helps their brain recover somewhat. Now, does their brain atrophy from loss of the proper nutrients, or does the alcohol actually cause damage?
Both. So people that are heavy drinkers get their calories from alcohol instead of healthy foods, and the alcohol actually depletes the brain. It makes the nutrients less likely to get in the brain where they're needed.
Wow. Now, when you were working at NIH, I remember our conversations, you actually had access to a lot of the blood work in the military where you could predict suicide rates with people who had low vitamin D and low omega-3 oils. Is that correct?
That's right. So we were fascinated by the fact that maybe nutrition could really impact the brains, and that would be why people become impulsive and would give in to the desire to kill themselves. And we were able to collect a large sample of blood from soldiers and sailors and airmen that had died by suicide and compare them with matched control subjects. So what we found is that suicide was probably at least partially related to vitamin D and also omega-3s. Vitamin D study was one that I did when we looked at people. We had to compare different seasons when the blood was drawn and so forth. But what we found is it counted for about 5% of the variance. 5% of the suicides might be related to low vitamin D.
Wow.
Again, it's an association study, but it was very important. It's very important to see how frequently people in the military had low vitamin D levels.
And I remember you also has some, I don't know if it is studies or even your lectures talked about exposure to the sun and Scandinavian countries and suicide rates, but also the incidence of cancer with people, overall
Right.
cancer versus skin cancer
Right.
and exposure to sun. Can you elaborate a little bit on
Right.
that?
Very controversial area because there's some studies out of Scandinavia which track people for decades, and the people that avoided the sun and smoked cigarettes did the worst. The people that they also looked at people that were sun worshipers and got a lot of sun, and the effect of cigarette smoking was as bad as avoiding the sun. So if you
Did them both.
If you laid out in the sun and didn't smoke, that was the best. But if you laid out in the sun and you smoked cigarettes, it was about the same effect, same bad effect from smoking as if you avoided the sun.
Wow. And I think there was another study showing the Sun Belt of the United States where it showed the rate of cancers of, melanomas were increased, but all other cancers were decreased.
Melanoma is fascinating because a lot of people get melanomas on skin that's not exposed to the sun. Mm-hmm. And the data shows that once people develop melanomas, they're more aggressive, they're rapidly metastasize and so forth when there's low vitamin D levels. So it's sort of it's not clear whether melanoma is related to the sun exposure in that way, but certainly basal cell carcinomas, the other sun exposed areas, cancers that you get from sun exposed areas, those cancers don't necessarily kill people, and they actually are associated with longevity in one study. So
if you have squamous cell carcinoma, you actually will live longer because you might have had more vitamin D?
Right. That's the theory. Or maybe just sun exposure. Now, there's a lot of benefits to sunlight that are not related to vitamin D. You get nitric oxide production, you get melatonin, you get endorphins, you get lower cytokines, and you also get the effect of infrared in your body. And apparently the infrared light also has a benefit deep inside your tissues to reduce inflammation in the mitochondria, as deep as 5 inches in your body. Whoa. And all these benefits of sunlight are kind of tied up with vitamin D. So when we look back on the exposure of the soldiers to sunlight, it may have been the vitamin D that protected against suicide, or maybe one of these other factors.
Well, then it could be that the vitamin D is a biomarker for something else that we haven't even discovered
Exactly. It could be that, but we do know sun exposure isn't all as bad as they say it is, and it may prevent infections like COVID. It may prevent serious respiratory illnesses. And I'm a member of a group of scientists that study vitamin D, and we think that vitamin D could explain a lot of the health disparities because people with melanin in their skin don't make as much vitamin D for a given amount of sunlight. So people that are exposed to lots of sun and have light skin have plenty of vitamin D, whereas if you have dark skin and you're indoors working in front of a computer at a professional job and you don't get sunlight, you're oftentimes vitamin D deficient.
What's the best way to get vitamin D?
Best way to get vitamin D is be out in the sun without a shirt on.
Okay, I'll start doing that at lunchtime around here. So people tend to, we measure it, you're deficient, and then people will supplement with it. And they take the boluses. And when I was in clinical practice, I remember the medical practitioners would give them a big dose. They give them like a 6 to 8 week treatment, and then they stop it. And I would test them again a year later, and they're back to
Right.
being low. It's
Right.
so much more than just taking a supplement.
Pill, right? Yeah, the pills are great. I think in our survey of vitamin D experts, most of us took more than 4,000 units a day. 4,000 or 5,000 units a day was sort of the average, and that'll give me an average dose of blood level about 50. And most of us consider that's probably pretty healthy.
At what level does it become toxic? Or does it?
It's way high. Vitamin D toxicity is way overblown. In my career as a medical doctor, in the literature, I don't think there's anybody that's died from vitamin D.
I agree with you on that. Now,
It hasn't happened. Yeah.
Vitamin A you can overdose on much easier.
Right.
Another fat soluble vitamin. But yeah, so vitamin D, you're all about sunlight exposure. What's a good source for omega-3s?
Well, after doing my research, I started eating fish every day. So I think fish is the best. Now, it has to be fish that comes from a natural source, because if you feed fish soybeans and corn in a tank, they don't have omega-3s. They get omega-3 through the food chain from algae. And so deep sea, oily fish have the most omega-3s, but a tilapia or a catfish that's raised in a tank over Thailand doesn't have very many at all. So.
Exactly. So is it safe to say that a grass-fed beef has more omega-3s than a tilapia that's been fed
right.
soybean and corn? So they actually have more omega-6s. So it's actually it's the wildness of it, the wild salmon, the wild tuna. Of course, they don't farm tuna, but wild fish is superior to farm fish.
Well, it's in the particulars of these fish that are fed in tanks where they feed the fish soybeans. So you have to feed, like trout don't eat soybeans and salmon don't eat soybeans. So you don't have to worry about those not having omega-3s in them. But
Got it. So this is interesting. So really appreciate this, and the concept for our viewers of food can be the slowest acting poison, or it could be the most effective medicine for us. And we've uncovered a lot today. Basically, we need to have an adequate amount of vitamin D and omega-3s. Chronic alcohol use causes brain shrinkage, which can be counteracted by cessation and returning to having the good oils, omega-3 oils. And then you also provide treatment for alcohol addiction.
That's right. So I will say about the omega-3s is that the dose probably really is important. We don't know exactly the right dose, but it's probably pretty high that you need to recover quickly. People I remember one lady in my practice was taking medicines for drinking, and it helped her some, but it just didn't do the trick. And after a couple of years, she had an episode where it seemed like she was having mood swings of bipolar. And there was a study that showed you use high dose omega-3s for bipolar disorder, it really helped. So I said, okay, why don't you triple up on your dose? Use 2 tablespoons of fish oil every day, see what happens. Next time I saw her, she'd stop drinking.
Whoa.
She hadn't been off alcohol for 3 weeks in a row since, for the last 30 years. And it was really quite remarkable. So that's happened several times in my practice now. where people will be doing medicines and doing all the right things, trying to quit drinking, but just the omega-3s will just stop it dead, and they just won't drink anymore. The other thing to remember is that the omega-3s have a long half-life in the brain. So my 5 minutes of fame was this picture here, this magazine article. This is a cover showing the uptake of the omega-3 fatty acid in the brain, DHA. And what we found is that when people stop drinking, their brain takes up a lot more DHA. And in fact, the half-life of DHA in the brain is like 2.5 years. So that means you're going to see effects of having more fish oil for 10 years before you can, say that you're where you want to be. So it's really an important element. I could sample someone's tissue and say, oh, you're a fish eater, or you don't eat fish.
You could tell them with blood test or for
yeah,
biopsy?
I could in the laboratory. There's no commercial test like that, but I would take your muscle tissue, your fat tissue, and send it off to the lab, and I could say, yeah, you're probably Japanese because of how much fish you've been eating. And that may really protect people from the brain shrinkage of alcohol.
It does.
And we just don't know. We don't know yet.
Okay.
My theory is that it does. And a lot of people think that as well, because the brain is made of fat. It's made of DHA. It's one of the more important fats. And that drives so many of our neurotransmitters, so many of our mental illnesses respond to this. And that may be something that in the future we'll have more research about to understand.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been listening to Dr. John Umhau, and this is Clinical Rounds.
Thanks for watching another episode of Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.